Hi everyone, this is a video to follow up on factorizing harder quadratic expressions. This time we're going to go through how to solve those expressions if they were equations, and I'm going to use a similar method to factorizing as Mr. Dorn did in his video. So just like in our previous video, there are 3 steps that you need to follow. Step 1, making sure the equation equals 0. And this equation does. Step 2, factorize. And you need to factorize the left-hand side. Step 3, make each bracket equal 0 and solve. Okay, so let's look at this example here. It's asking us to solve 8x squared plus 6x minus 9. So the first thing I'm going to do is factorize this left-hand side. So just like Mr. Dorn had said in his video, we want the 2 numbers in our bracket to add to equal 6. But this time we don't want to make it multiply to 9. So we know we want to add together to give us the number 6. But this time we want them to multiply together to give us the number minus 72. Now I get this number minus 72 because I'm multiplying these 2 numbers together. So it's the coefficient of x squared being multiplied by the constant at the end. And that's where I'm getting the minus 72 from. So we've got to think about our factor pairs of negative 72 and which of those factor pairs that will add together to give us our 6. Now because it's a negative, that means one of our factors is going to have to be a negative number. Okay, so if we think about 72, we can have 8 and 9. They're the most obvious because we've just multiplied them 2 together. But no matter whether we have a minus 8, if I do minus 8, add 9, that will give me 1. Even if I did 8 and minus 9, it'll give me minus 1. So we know that factor pair is not going to work. So I know another factor pair that will give me 72 will be 12 and 6. And if I make the 6 negative and I add these 2 numbers together, 12 add negative 6, that will give me the 6 that I want for them to add together. So this will be the factor pair that I'll be using. So looking at this equation, 8x squared plus 6x minus 9 equals 0. I know this middle term is going to be split to 12 and minus 6. So I'm going to do 8x squared plus 12x minus 6x minus 9 equals 0. And then just like Mr. Dorn had done in his previous video, we're going to split this in half, and I'm going to factorize these 2 terms first. So I know 4 goes into both numbers and both terms, but I also know they have an x in common. So 4x is what I can factorize out of these 2 terms. And that will leave me with 2x inside. 4x times 2x gives me the 8x. And then 4x times 3 will give me the 12x. If I look at the next 2 terms, I can factorize not just a number, but I'm actually going to factorize the negative as well. Negative 3 goes into negative 6 and negative 9. So I'm going to factorize negative 3 out. Negative 3 times 2x gives me negative 6x, and negative 3 times positive 3 will give me the negative 9. Now I know I've done my factorizing correctly because there's a bracket that they have in common. So now those 2 brackets, I can factorize that bracket out to give me 2x plus 3, and the outside of my brackets we'll create the second bracket, 4x minus 3. And it's all still equal to 0. So I've done now these two steps here. It was already equal to 0, so that's step 1. Step 2, factorize the left-hand side. So all of this is us factorizing for the left-hand side. Now we're going to do step 3, make each bracket equal to 0, and we're going to solve it. So the first bracket, I'm going to do this in red, is 2x plus 3. And I'm going to make that equal to 0. And I'm going to solve this like a regular equation. So first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the 3 by subtracting 3 from both sides. So 2x equals minus 3. And then I want to get rid of this 2. This is 2 times x, so its inverse is divide by 2. So I'm going to divide by 2 from both sides. So x is equal to negative 3 over 2, or negative 1.5 if you wish to write it that way. So that's the first bracket. And then I'm going to do the same to the second bracket. 4x minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to solve this equation, so I'm going to get rid of this negative 3 by adding 3 to both sides. So 4x equals 3. And then I'm going to get rid of this 4. That's multiplying with x by dividing by 4 on both sides. And just like before, I'm going to write it as a fraction. 4 doesn't go into 3, but I can write it as 4 over 3. And that's my second solution. So to solve this equation here, that means x is equal to minus 3 over 2. And x equals 3/4. Okay, and that will be our last step. Make each bracket equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so I'm going to go through another couple of examples because this is a tricky method to get the hang of. And I'm going to go through another question. So here is another question from one of the knowledge organizers. 6x squared minus 11x plus 3 equals 0. So keep in mind the 3 steps that we need to use. Step 1, make sure it's equal to 0. Step 2, factorize. And step 3, make each bracket equal 0 and solve. Okay, so we can see step 1 is fine. It's equal to 0. So we can just go ahead and factorize. Again, remember, we want the two numbers in our bracket to add to give the middle term. So I want it to add together to give me minus 11, but I want them to times together to equal 18. So the two numbers in our bracket equal 18. And remember, this 18 comes from the coefficient of x squared and the constant at the end. It's those two numbers multiplied together that give me the 18. So I'm going to think of my factor pairs of 18. And because we want a negative, keep that in mind, we want negative 11. The fact that we need a negative, but my number is positive, means both of our factors need to be negative. So 6, I know 6 and 3, 6 times 3 is 18. So negative 6, add negative 3, that equals minus 9. So that's not what we want. And we keep going. And we know 9 times 2 is 18. So negative 9, add negative 2 equals negative 11. And that is what we need. So those are the factors that I'm going to use when I'm factorizing. So if we look at the equation, 6x squared minus 11x plus 3 equals 0. It is this term in the middle that is being split into these two factors that we've worked out. So the 6x squared stays the same, the plus 3 stays the same, and my minus 11x is going to become minus 9x. So that's where this minus 9 comes from, and minus 2x. Okay. And then we split it down the middle, and we factorize the first two terms, and then factorize the second two terms. So I'm going to look at the first two. They both have x in common, and they also can be divided by 3. So my highest common factor is 3x, and that's what I'm going to factorize out of my bracket. 3x, 3 times 2 gives me 6. X times x gives me x squared. And then I'm going to look at the next one. 3 times 3 is going to give me 9. So that's going to, 3 times minus 3 is going to give me minus 9. And I already have x, so I don't need to do anything else. Here I am going to factorize a negative again. Now the reason I know I need to factorize the negative is because this first term on the second side of this dotted line is negative, and I tend to factorize the negative out. It's similar to the previous example that I've just done. So I'm going to factorize out. But the only thing that these two numbers have in common is 1. 1 goes into 2, 1 goes into 3. So I'm going to factorize a negative 1. That will leave me with negative 1 times positive 2x to give me negative 2x. And then negative 1 times negative 3 will give me the positive 3. And then you can see that both my brackets are the same. And that's what we're aiming for. Now, when they're both the same, then I know that that's my first bracket, 2x minus 3. And then whatever's outside the two brackets, that's what I'm going to use to write the second bracket. So this 3x minus 1 comes from what's outside of the bracket. It's all still equal to 0. So now we've done our factorizing. So I'm going to move on to step 3, make each bracket equal to 0 and solve. So 2x minus 3 equals 0. That's my first bracket. I'm going to get rid of this minus 3 by adding 3 to both sides. So 2x equals 3. The 2 is timesing with x, so I'm going to get rid of that by dividing by 2 on both sides. So x equals, 2 doesn't go into 3, so I'm going to write it as a fraction, 3 over 2. So there's our first solution. I'm going to do the same thing with the second bracket. 3x minus 1 equals 0. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So 3x equals 1. 3 is timesing with x, so I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. So x now equals 1 divided by 3, so 1 over 3. So my two solutions to the equation is x equals 3 over 2 and x equals a third. Okay.